Good evening. I'm John White, owner and proprietor of American Scraps, the nation's leading, august, premier industrial converter of American historical artifacts and documents into comics. Tonight, the latest in our series of ongoing demonstrative inking demonstration film strips, in which I peel back the curtain, so to speak, and give you a glimpse into exactly how this process works and how it is that we convert these documents and artifacts into historical comics. You can see the end result of tonight's strip by going on to americanscraps.com, where you can also find the back catalog of past demonstrative inking film strips, along with the entire back catalog of strips themselves. americanscraps.com is also where you can find mugs, just like this, which, while supplies last, would love to find a place in your cupboard. The story tonight is one of nationalization, a fancy, funny-sounding word that really describes a very simple concept. It's where we, collectively, all of us, you and me, take something that up till then had been privately owned, and we own it. Collectively, you and me. Story in this place happened from just after Christmas 1917 to summer of 1920, and it involved the rail system. Every train, every mile of track, every laborer therein, we took them over. And the results were fantastic. The scene is 1917. Europe is headlong into World War I, and we're just about to join the fight. Now, leading up to that, we sold our allies $3 billion worth of munitions. As we're illustrating here in panel 1, those munitions needed to get to their awaiting cargo ships that would traverse the Atlantic and get those munitions back over to Europe. This involved the U.S. rail network, which was 260,000 miles of track. Think about how big that is, especially for the time. Owned between 441 separate rail companies. Therein lies the problem. Because it was so inefficiently redundant and jumbled and tangled, those trains rarely actually got to the port cities they needed to get to offload their $3 billion worth of munitions to those awaiting European ships. They would just sit there, acting as unwitting warehouses and storehouses for this very unused cargo. Getting all that off to the ships only compounded what was already an existing problem. Problem of maintenance, problem of efficiency, problem of labor, problem of the rail equipment itself. Thus it was that the Wilson administration enacted this emergency legislation that created the short-lived but wonderful while it was USRA, the United States Railroad Administration. And so it was that we took it all over. The results were, in a word, wonderful. It was better for rail workers, and you can see that here. We allude to it in panels 2, and then down here in this first call-out below the big meaty panel. Section workers, the main labor force of the rail system, their pay doubled from $1.50 to $3 a day under nationalization. Enforced 8-hour days, thanks to the recently passed Adamson Act, which back then was a very new concept that you only had to work for 8 hours in one shift. Not that we've made much progress on that front since. Contracts were upheld. Union workers for the rail specifically were called brotherhoods. Better efficiencies. And that goes for everybody involved, not just the workers. Duplicate passenger services were eliminated. Individual companies' terminal facilities and shops were shared, because, again, this was all owned by one firm now, one organizing body. Better for passengers. Now, this is where things really get fun. Tourism was promoted. It was made easier for those wanting to get away or go from city to city for business or pleasure. And if you look up the handy wiki article of this, there's a lovely little poster whose copy reads, and I'll keep this brief because I want the brush to dry. Be one of the thousands who travels to the land of green and gold, California. Enjoy the great outdoors under summer skies. Take the family with you, city or rural. Live within your income and escape zero weather. Get the most out of your trip. En route, visit the national parks, national monuments, and other winter resorts. Ask for info about excursion fairs and winter resorts. Now, think of a couple things. One, just how cheery and charming and earnest that is, and how great it is that it's promoting something that belongs to all of us. And also just how much of a better deal it sounds than air travel that we have to do today, where it's a hassle to not only, if you live on the outskirts of what is not a hub city, to get to a hub city, and the fact that you're basically at the whim of some other regional mega route sense of what it considers the most efficient and profitable route to get people from place to place. Turn back to the art here for a second. Note what's going on here. The internal lines are really thin, and the outer strokes are thicker. That's something you'll find is really common in black and white line art. Chris Ware probably being the master at that. I hope you guys are following along and that this comes through on my friend here, the overhead camera. So, rail nationalization. It also led to better equipment. Over 100,000 railroad cars were bought by the USRA. We bought them, so to speak. Almost 2,000 steam locomotives were ordered, and all of these, by the way, were state-of-the-art. USRA standard designs, which were so good that all rail, even after nationalization ended, kept getting made to USRA standards for 3 decades after the fact, well into the 1950s. All right, so after nationalization, what happened? Like I said, it ended in 1920. It was a short-lived experiment. Everything was returned to the original owners in better state than we first took it. Owners of those firms were fairly compensated for the profit increases they, I guess, ostensibly missed out on during the time, so compensation went around. Now, kind of a denouement, we tried nationalization of the rail later, in the 1970s with Conrail. This was an attempt to nationalize just freight rail, so not things that people like you and me ride on, but the heavy stuff that moves things and goods. Conrail didn't last long, only into the 1980s. However, you're probably familiar with the larger, more durable experiment that still is with us today, Amtrak. This was the U.S. nationalizing passenger rail service, and it is a lovely addition to any city you're in, and probably the city you're watching this from right now. Again, we're going to do thin interior lines for this beachhead, and then thicker lines when it hits the Atlantic. Little wave buddies here. Of course, this will all get a lot more depth once it's scanned in, and we can use gray tones to emphasize what really should be popping out. I'm going to get the speech balloon here. So, let's step back a bit and talk about nationalization. Bigger than just trains. There's something of a national conversation going on the day that I'm recording this about nationalization. Maybe in some cases it makes sense for all of us to own things for which there isn't really a sensible profit motive to be had. Maybe it makes sense in certain categories of things that we all rely on, things that help all of us together. It makes a certain sense for us to kind of have that in the public domain. Things that are owned by us and used by us and benefit all of us. Now, we do this today. The district that you live in, collectively you all own and have control over the K-12 schools. The school you go to now is something that together the people who make up your little district all own, and that's a good thing. Now, we do this on a national level, too. I mentioned Amtrak. We all together own that. The post office, we all own that. The Tennessee Valley Authority, thank goodness we all own that. That is a Currently 50% and on its way to 100% completely carbon-free energy company, currently serving 7 of our 50 states. Like I said, well on their way to full decarbonization. But we own that. Good people running that. So that's a few things, but it's not nearly enough. Other countries right now are really going bananas with it to wonderful effect. For example, Norway. 74 state-owned enterprises. 74. Largest oil company in Norway, Equinor, now called Statoil, collectively owned. Largest telecommunications company, Telenor, publicly owned. Largest financial services company there, DNB, publicly owned. Think about what that would mean if we had a similar situation in the US. I said we own the post office and we own the TVA and we own Amtrak, but what if, like Norway, we owned the biggest energy company and financial services company and airline? Well, that would be like all of us collectively owning AT&T and JP Morgan Chase and ExxonMobil. It'd be pretty fun. Think of how efficient that would be. Get these little wavelets here under the boat. Not just Norway either. Finland, 67 state-owned enterprises. Biggest airline, biggest energy company, biggest infrastructure engineering company. It's big stuff. Doesn't just stop at SOEs either. Finnish government owns 1/3 of their nation's wealth. 1/4 of Finnish workers are in a government service of some kind. I don't know if you were paying attention to Finnish news last year, 2019, but a Finnish postal workers strike, a few thousand people agitating for what was rightfully theirs, led not long after to the resignation of their prime minister. By the way, what I said earlier about how collectively they own 1/4 of their own nation's wealth, you might think, well, that's not a very big number, but here in the United States, it's -3%. Room for improvement, friends. Today, conversations about nationalization still going on. Like I said, we're in something of a international discourse about this now. And wouldn't you know it, just a few weeks ago, Ireland announced that they were nationalizing their own hospitals, something that, under current circumstances, we might be well to entertain also. Okay, this is obviously a more complicated object than those trains in the first panel. We're going into someone's sleeve now. There's fabric folds, there's contouring around the actual form here. All right, we're in a pretty good groove here, going to our second panel. This might be a good time to look at your art. All right, so last time we met, I asked you to send in your art submissions based on who you were looking into for the subject of democratically owned wealth instruments. Boy, that was a fun one, huh? All right, I want to thank all of you for the deluge of submissions I got. It was super fun. I regret that we can only show a few here today, but let's dive in. The first one here comes from young Melvin Blintz of Ham Lake, Minnesota, drawing Rudolph Hilferding. Excellent work, Melvin. Boy, that is looking sharp. Rudolph Hilferding, of course, a hero of collectively owned wealth. His 1905 book, Finance Capital, was the first one to really articulate how what until then had been seen as just kind of a simple matter of ownership equaling factory owners, kind of a monopoly man way, that things in 1905 had already evolved to a pretty sophisticated state, that now, to be a holder of capital, you could simply take part in the stock market. That this new instrument, the idea of stocks, could, even though it was still owned by just a few people, could start to kind of socialize, kind of distributively own the question of capital ownership. It's not just literally owning a factory anymore. Get the little eyebrow going on there. Nose. Good work, Melvin. All right, next up, let's look at what was sent in by young Irving Porter-Zeby of North Puyallup, Washington. Irving, my word, this is lovely. Here we've got a joint portrait of both Arthur Lewis and James Mead. Nice little composition there. Lewis and Mead, of course, in the mid-20th century, they took Hilferding's idea and took it to its next level. They were positing how governments themselves could actually be the instrument here to spring off that concept. States themselves could buy up corporate ownership, and then, in turn, that money, which would now be the people's money, would help fund the services and the budgets of what those states need to get by on. All right, so Hilferding starts off the idea of, hey, collective ownership could happen via buying up those stocks. Mead and Lewis taking it to the next level and saying, well, hey, if you really want to get creative here, you could have states own it. That's a good segue to our third submission of the government official who actually then put that idea into logical practice. Let's look at Rudolf Meidner, as colored by Vribel Kauzanowski of Palmdale, California. My goodness, Vribel, this is just lovely. All right, so Meidner of the Meidner Plan, Meidner, of course, the famed Swedish economist, who finally in the 1980s had his chance to put this together for the people of Sweden. And it started gobbling up those capital assets on behalf of the people. Before long, Swedish people collectively owned 7% of their own industrial GDP. 7%. Again, let's compare it here to -3. It was going great guns until the 1990s when a change in Sweden's political fortune brought in more of a right-wing turn, and they lost out on that experiment. But we look to what Meidner and the Swedish people pulled off as a really great natural experiment of this going well. All right, thank you all for sending those in. Just lovely, lovely stuff. All right, turning back here to our drawing of the 1917 to 1920 United States Railroad Administration, nationalization of the rail network and all the cars therein. Really great stuff. If you just go down kind of an internet rabbit hole, you can see some lovely trains, see some lovely new train designs that the USRA standardized and brought in. If you're yourself living near, of course, a rail museum, there's no better way to spend a Saturday. Suddenly get a little grimace on this guy here. He's upset. He's working really hard. He's getting paid very little for it. Remember, $150 a day for those section workers. Of course, we're looking for art submissions for our next film strip. So you yourself, if you feel comfortable with this, or have your mom or dad help you do this, email your art submission to me, john@americanscraps.com. Hope to show as many of those as I can in our next film strip. For the topic, how about you color for me your favorite state-owned enterprise? This could be American, this could be non-American, whatever you like, whatever really is a meaningful one to you. Like I said, I'm a big fan of TVA. You can pick that one, pick the post office, pick, I guess technically the FDIC might count. Just really find something you like. If you're watching this from the UK, or you're just Anglophile yourself, the National Health Service is a nationalization not just of health insurance, but health facilities and the actual providers in those facilities. Wonderful, wonderful exercise of nationalization there. So yeah, pick your favorite state-owned enterprise and send it in. Could be that Finnish airline we talked about. That sounds nice. Your travel could be a lot better than it is. All right, here we get to the shovel. Look at it go. Again, later during the scanning and the tones phase, we're gonna define the edges of these objects, but we want to be subtle about it here. By the way, let's do a little gear check. Nothing fancy or expensive about what's going on here in case you want to replicate this at home. This is just a simple Winsor Newton Series 7 sable brush, really, really common. And our thanks to the humble Sable for giving up some of his fur so we could be doing this today. Noble, beautiful creature. Dipping it into just your run-of-the-mill black India ink. And then once this is all done, we then have the fun of erasing the underlying pencil marks, scanning it, and going to town on those tones. This is a very easy to reproduce setup. I'm doing the actual drawing on just simple Strathmore smooth Bristol board. Again, very easy to acquire. Just your local art supply shop, or if they happen to be closed for whatever reason, you can find these things online very easily. Very cheap stuff. You know what? His friend is pretty upset too. Let's give him some little stress beads there. Here's the smoke billowing out of this coal furnace. Just driving the train here. Gonna make these really thin lines because they may not actually make it to the finished product. It might just be little hints for myself later about where the billowing smoke should go. These are all decisions that you get to make in the computer later after you scan in the art. Alright, his friend has a shovel too. You can see I'm being vague here about what exactly their hands are doing to articulate around this. This is an act of laziness on my part. Few things are harder to draw than hands, friends. Also, remember it's important to stay hydrated during drawing. Another act of, not nationalization, but local utility ownership. Together, the people in the county I live in own this water treatment plant. And boy, is the end result delicious. Another little part of life where it doesn't really make sense to have things bound by a profit motive. Alright, almost done with our little fella here. Try to put in some little lines indicating the motion of the fabric here. Boy, you know, these guys are working so hard, they really do deserve that standardized 8-hour workday and that double pay, don't they? It's the satisfaction of knowing that there's a whole sector they belong to. It's not just one little lousy firm, it's the whole network. 250,000 miles of trackage. They're doing something here that has some substance. They're not alienated from their labor. They're a part of it. And it materially goes to help the people they're doing life with. Well, friends, I really can't thank you enough for joining me on this session today. Again, send in those art submissions of your favorite state-owned enterprise. Can't wait to see them, and we'll review them and talk about them next time. Again, you can find the finished result of this going on to americanscraps.com. I want to thank a couple of people who went into this. First of all, the Arsenal for Democracy podcast. A couple years ago, they did an episode that was the inspiration for this on rail nationalization. You're going to love that if you haven't heard it. You can subscribe to them outright. Also, a gentleman called Matt Vernig, who is beloved by many and who has written a lot on both state-owned enterprises, the benefits of nationalization, and on those collectively owned, democratically controlled wealth instruments. He's written a lot and recorded a lot in a very approachable, fun tone, so I encourage you to go check those out. Most of all, I'd like to thank the good people of American Scraps. Again, this stalwart, august enterprise could not happen without the laborers and the warehousemen, the conveyor belt cleaners, all of them that together go into this complicated business of industrially converting artifacts to comics. It's a process by which I thank them profusely, And I sign off by, again, thanking you, the viewer. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Send in those drawings, and let's hear it for State-Owned Enterprises. Good night.